They didn't know the small black device on the coffee table was mine. They thought it was my son's Bluetooth speaker. By Tuesday morning, the recording on it had been sent to my lawyer, and the meeting they had held about my future had become the meeting that ended theirs. Here is what actually happened. My name is Genevieve. I am 71 years old. My husband, Conrad, died in 2017. My son, Tobias, is 43. He is married to a woman named Marisol. They have one daughter, my granddaughter, Ren, age 9. I had been invited to a family meeting on a Sunday afternoon in early November. The invitation had come from Marisol, by text, on the previous Tuesday. The text had said, "Hi, Genevieve. Tobias and I wanted to set up a family meeting this Sunday at 2 to discuss some long-term planning around your living situation, finances, and care. Marisol's mother, Eulalia, will be joining, since she's been through this with her own mom recently. We want to make this as easy on you as possible. Hope that works. XOXOM." I had read the text twice. I had noticed 3 things. First, the phrase, your living situation, finances, and care, was written as if it were a single category, as if these were 3 subheadings of the same conversation, which they were not. My living situation was excellent. I lived in the 4-bedroom house Conrad and I had bought in 1981, which was paid off and required no care. My finances were excellent. Between Conrad's pension and the rental income from a small duplex he had purchased in 1989, I brought in approximately $11,000 a month, more than I spent. My care was excellent. I was in good health, drove my own car, did my own gardening, played tennis twice a week with a woman named Adelaide, whom I had known since 1973. There was no problem with my living situation, finances, or care. Second, the phrase, Marisol's mother, Eulalia, will be joining, since she's been through this with her own mum recently, was the most informative phrase in the text. Eulalia had moved her own mother out of her family home in 2022 and into a residential care facility called Larkspur Hills, despite the fact that her mother had not, by any medical measurement, required residential care. Eulalia had then sold the mother's house and used a portion of the proceeds to renovate her own kitchen. Her mother had died at Larkspur Hills 16 months later. Eulalia had received the residual estate. I had attended the funeral. I had watched Eulalia at the funeral. I had noticed that she had not cried. Third, the phrase, "we want to make this as easy on you as possible," was, in my experience, the phrase a younger woman uses when she has already decided that something difficult is going to happen to an older woman and would like the older woman to participate in her own difficulty without resistance. I had replied to the text at 4:47 p.m. "Sounds good, sweetheart. Sunday at 2. My place or yours?" She had replied immediately. "Ours. Tobias is making chicken. We'll have everything set up." I had noted the urgency of her reply. I had then driven to my friend Adelaide's house and asked her one question. "Adelaide, where did you put the small voice recorder Conrad bought us in 2011 for the cruise?" Adelaide had thought about it for a moment. "Genevieve, it's in the top drawer of my hall console. I have been holding it since you asked me to take it when you cleared out Conrad's office in 2018. Why?" "Marisol has scheduled a family meeting on Sunday to discuss my living situation, finances, and care. Eulalia is attending." Adelaide had looked at me for a long moment. Then she had walked to the hall console, opened the drawer, and taken out the small black voice recorder. She had placed it in my hand. She had said, "Genevieve, Conrad bought this in 2011 because he wanted us to record our anniversary dinner. He bought a better model than we needed, because he said, voice recorders were the kind of thing you should always have a slightly better version of than you think you need. I have been waiting to give this back to you since 2018. I am glad it is going to be useful." I had taken it home. I had charged it overnight. I had brought it with me to the family meeting on Sunday in the small leather handbag Conrad had given me on our 25th anniversary. I want to pause here and ask you something honestly. If your daughter-in-law sent you a text scheduling a family meeting about your living situation, finances, and care, and you knew in your chest that the meeting was not going to be about what the text said, it was going to be about what would you do? I think a lot of women would have asked clarifying questions over the phone. I think some would have declined the meeting entirely. I think a brave handful would have shown up with a list of their own concerns, prepared in advance. I did something else. I want to tell you what I did, and I want to tell you why it worked. I have learned, in 71 years, that there are two kinds of difficult conversations. The first kind is the conversation where everyone in the room is trying to understand a problem together. In that kind of conversation, you bring your honesty, your patience, and your willingness to be wrong. The second kind is the conversation where some of the people in the room have decided in advance what is going to happen and are using the structure of a conversation to legitimize the decision. In that kind of conversation, you bring documentation. I did not yet know which kind of conversation Sunday was going to be. But Marisol's text, with its careful three-part categorization, its enthusiastic exclamation point, its invocation of Eulalia had given me enough information to prepare for either. The voice recorder was for one kind of conversation only. If the meeting turned out to be the first kind, the honest kind, the recorder would stay in my purse, unused. If the meeting turned out to be the second kind, the recorder would do its work, and I would have what I needed. I would not know which kind of conversation I was in until I was in it. That was fine. The recorder did not need to know in advance. I arrived at Tobias and Marisol's house at 1:54 p.m. on Sunday. Tobias greeted me at the door. He kissed me on the cheek. He told me Marisol was finishing the chicken. He led me into the living room. The living room was set up for a meeting. I noticed this immediately. Their usual living room configuration was a couch facing a television with two armchairs at angles, the way most living rooms are configured. Today the armchairs had been turned to face the couch directly. A coffee table had been pulled into the center of the arrangement. On the coffee table sat 4 matching white ceramic coffee cups, a plate of cookies, a small white pitcher of cream, and a small black Bluetooth speaker. The Bluetooth speaker was approximately the same size as my voice recorder. I noticed this too. Eulalia was already seated in one of the armchairs. She was wearing a soft pink cardigan and the small, careful expression of a woman who had been briefed. "Genevieve, so good to see you." "Eulalia, it's been a while." "Since Mom's funeral, I think." "Since your mother's funeral, yes." She nodded. She did not detect the implication. I had not, in fact, intended an implication. I had simply named the last event we had attended together. Eulalia heard it as a friendly conversational marker. I noticed that too. I sat down on the couch. I set my purse on the couch beside me, on my left, where my right hand could reach it without anyone noticing. I unzipped the top of the purse, halfway the kind of half-zip an older woman performs when she is about to take out her reading glasses, and I activated the voice recorder inside it. The small green light came on, hidden by the leather flap. I left the purse half open. The recorder was now running. Marisol came in from the kitchen with the chicken on a platter. She had clearly been told by Tobias that I had arrived. Her smile was bright. She was wearing a soft cream sweater and the kind of tailored slacks women wear when they want to look professionally compassionate. "Genevieve, so glad you're here. Let me just set this down and we can get started." We did not eat the chicken. This was the first sign. The chicken sat on the platter, getting cold, while Marisol settled into the other armchair and arranged her notepad on her lap. The notepad was significant. I noted it. Tobias sat beside her on the arm of her chair, not in his own. He did not have a notepad. He had a coffee cup. He looked at the floor more than at me. Marisol opened her notepad. "Genevieve, thank you so much for being here. We thought it would be good to have a clear, calm conversation about some things that have been on our minds." We wanted Eulalia here because she's been through a similar transition with her own mom, and we thought her perspective would be helpful. So let's just dive in. I smiled. I picked up my coffee cup. Of course, sweetheart. She glanced at her notepad. So, Tobias and I have been talking, and we have some concerns about long-term sustainability. The house, primarily. It's a big house for one person, Genevieve. 4 bedrooms, 2 stories. The maintenance must be exhausting. And the property taxes Tobias was telling me what they are. That's a lot of overhead for a fixed income. My income is not fixed, Marisol. Well, you know what I mean. Retirement income. It doesn't grow. Conrad's pension grows with cost of living adjustments annually. The rental income from the duplex has increased by an average of 4% per year for the last 14 years. Both line items grow. A small pause. Right, of course. Sorry. I meant that there are certain risks at your age that we want to be ahead of. Falls, for instance. 2-story houses can be very dangerous for a woman your age. I have not had a fall, Marisol. Not yet. Not ever. Eulalia leaned forward. Genevieve, honey, can I tell you a little about my mom? I attended her funeral. Eulalia, I know your mother. Well, I want to tell you what she said to me 3 years ago when we had a conversation just like this one. She told me she was fine. She told me her house was manageable. She told me she didn't want any changes. And then 6 months later, she had a stroke in the kitchen and was on the floor for 10 hours before anyone found her. 10 hours, Genevieve. I noted that Eulalia's mother had also lived in Eulalia's house at the time of her stroke, not her own. I noted that the 10 hours on the floor story was therefore impossible. I noted that Eulalia had not anticipated I would know the geography of her mother's last year. I did not correct her. The recorder was running. Eulalia. That sounds frightening. It was. It was a wake-up call. For our whole family. I am sure it was. Marisol jumped back in. So, Genevieve. What Tobias and I were thinking, and we want to emphasize this is just thinking out loud, is whether it might be time to start looking at some more manageable living arrangements. There's a beautiful place about 15 minutes from us, called Verdant Pines, and it has these gorgeous independent living cottages, fully accessible, with a meal plan and emergency response systems, and a community. How much does Verdant Pines cost, Marisol? She paused. Well, the entry fee is a little steep, but there are options for. How much is the entry fee? I think it's around 240,000, but that's for the larger cottage. The smaller cottages are $240,000 plus a monthly fee. There's a monthly fee, yes, around 6,000 a month. But that includes meals, housekeeping, transportation, and the entry fee. Is it refundable? It's partially refundable. The standard contract, refunds about 90% if you leave within the first 2 years. After that, it tapers down to 0 over how long? Over 8 years. So if I move into Verdant Pines next month, pay $240,000 and die in year 9, the facility keeps the entry fee. A long silence. Genevieve, that's not how we want to think about this. It is, however, how the contract works. I sipped my coffee. Tobias had not spoken yet. He was looking at his cup. His knees were slightly bouncing. Marisol glanced at her notepad again. Okay, let's set aside Verdant Pines for a moment. The other thing Tobias and I wanted to discuss is, and this is just a conversation, Genevieve. Please don't take this the wrong way, but we've been thinking about whether it might make sense for you to add Tobias to the deed of the house, as a precaution, for estate planning purposes, so that if something happens, the transition is smooth. There it was. I had been waiting for it. I had not known what specific form it would take, but I had known the meeting would arrive at the deed eventually. The Verdant Pines pitch had been the framing. The deed transfer was the actual request. The recorder was still running. I set down my coffee cup. Marisol. Yes. Why does Tobias need to be on the deed? For the smooth transition, like I said, if something happens to you, having him on the deed avoids probate, avoids legal fees. Tobias is already the sole beneficiary of my estate, including the house, in my will. The transition is already smooth. There is no probate concern. He inherits the house automatically upon my death. Adding him to the deed during my lifetime would not avoid any process that he will not face anyway. Well, but if you were incapacitated, there's no power of attorney protection that. Tobias has had medical power of attorney for me since 2018. Adelaide Whitlock is my financial power of attorney. Both documents are on file with my lawyer, Cordelia Marlowe, and have been in place for 6 years. Genevieve, I didn't know that. You did not. You did not ask. Tobias knew. Cordelia is the same lawyer who drafted your prenup before your wedding. The infrastructure for what you are describing already exists. The only thing adding Tobias to the deed during my lifetime would accomplish is to grant him and, through California's community property laws, you partial ownership of a house I own outright. It would also expose the house to any future creditor claims, lawsuits, or divorce proceedings involving either of you, which would not be a concern if the property remained in my sole name. Is that the smoothness you are referring to? Marisol had gone very still. Eulalia had also gone still. Tobias had stopped bouncing his knees. A long silence followed. Then Marisol said, very quietly, Genevieve, that's not what we... Marisol, may I ask you a question? Yes. When you were planning this meeting, did you and Tobias discuss what to do if I declined to add him to the deed? A pause. Genevieve, we hadn't gotten that far. Did you discuss Verdant Pines as a fallback? The thinking being that if I sold the house and moved into a residential facility, the equity from the house could be deposited into a joint account with Tobias to cover the entry fee, with the residual to be jointly managed. She did not answer. I let the silence sit. Eulalia, may I ask you a question? Yes. When Marisol called you for advice about how to structure today's meeting, did she ask you specifically how you had handled the financial mechanics of your mother's transition to Larkspur Hills? Eulalia's eyes widened just slightly. Genevieve, I think you're getting the wrong impression. Eulalia, the question. She asked, yes, but it was about logistics, not logistics, such as the timing, when to bring up the topic, how to frame it. And what did you tell her? A longer pause. Genevieve, this is not the conversation I came here for. Eulalia, I asked you a question. 3 women in this room have a vested interest in what you are about to say. One of them is your daughter-in-law's mother, who introduced me to you 11 years ago at a Christmas party and described you, at the time, as the most generous mother she had ever met. I would like to hear, in your own voice, what you told Marisol about the timing and framing of this meeting. I am happy to wait. The silence in the living room was now absolute. The chicken on the platter was now cold. Tobias finally looked up. He looked at his wife. Then he looked at me. Mom. Yes, Tobias. Mom, I'm sorry. He stood up from the arm of Marisol's chair. He walked over to the couch. He sat down on the other end of it, away from his wife. Mom, this was a setup. I knew it was. I went along with it. Marisol's been talking about the deed for 8 months. She read some article about elder financial planning, and she got fixated. I told her not to bring Eulalia. I told her it would look like an ambush. We did this anyway. I am so sorry. I looked at my son. I had been waiting for 43 years to see him do that. It was not a perfect moment. He had still let it get this far. He had still allowed his wife to schedule a meeting about my future and bring her mother as a corroborating witness. He had still sat on the arm of her chair instead of beside me on the couch when I arrived. But he had moved. Late, but he had moved. I set down my coffee cup. Tobias. Yes. Thank you. I picked up my handbag. I stood. I am going to leave now. I want all three of you to know that I am not angry. I am, however, informed, which is a different thing. The meeting you held today has clarified something for me that I had not been able to articulate before. I appreciate the clarity. Mom, please let me drive you home. Tobias, I am perfectly capable of driving myself home. I drove here. The car is in the driveway. The keys are in my purse. I will see you for lunch next Sunday. Alone. At my house, not yours. We will talk then about what the next year of our relationship is going to look like. I turned to Marisol. Marisol, I will not be seeing you for at least 6 months. After 6 months, you may write me a letter, a paper letter, not an email, explaining what you have learned about yourself between now and then. If the letter is honest, we will resume contact. If it is not, we will not. I turned to Eulalia. Eulalia, please give my best to your husband. Tell him I was sorry to miss him today. I imagine you and I will not see each other again. That is all right. I wish you a long and comfortable life. I walked to the door. Marisol called after me. Genevieve, please the chicken. I did not turn around. I drove home. I parked in my own driveway. I went inside. I took the voice recorder out of my purse. I sat at my kitchen table. I poured myself a glass of water. Then I picked up the phone and I called Cordelia. Cordelia. Genevieve, it is Sunday. It is. I am sorry. I have a recording I would like to email you. It is 47 minutes long. After you have listened to it, please call me back. We have some work to do. What kind of work? The kind that takes my son's wife off the will. A small silence. Genevieve, I will listen to it tonight. I will call you in the morning. May I ask one question first? Yes. Did they know you were recording? They did not. Excellent. We hung up. I emailed her the audio file at 4:18 p.m. She called me back at 9:47 the next morning. Genevieve, I have listened to it twice. 3 things. Yes. First, the recording is admissible in California. We are a 2-party consent state, which means recordings of confidential conversations require all parties' consent. A family meeting between 4 people in a private home would generally qualify as confidential. However, the recording would still be admissible in a probate dispute or a civil challenge to a will, because the recording is being used not to expose the conversation publicly, but to establish the intent and conduct of the parties involved. For our purposes, restructuring your estate documents, the recording is functionally bulletproof. It documents the existence of a coordinated effort to influence your testamentary decisions. Cordelia, that is good news. Second, the relevant moment for legal purposes is Marisol's question about the deed at the 23-minute mark, combined with Eulalia's acknowledgement that she had been consulted on timing and framing at minute 38. Together, these 2 passages establish coordination. Coordination is the legal threshold for what California probate law calls undue influence. If your son's wife had simply asked you to add Tobias to the deed in a one-on-one conversation, the request would be merely awkward. The fact that she scheduled a multi-party meeting with a corroborating witness whose own mother was moved into residential care under similar circumstances, that is, the legal architecture of a coordinated influence campaign. Cordelia, tell me what you recommend. Genevieve, I recommend that we restructure your will today. Tobias remains a beneficiary, but his share is now held in a subtrust, contingent on his behavior during the final years of your life. Marisol receives nothing. The house goes directly to Ren, your granddaughter held in trust, until she is 25, with my firm as trustee. The duplex rental property is moved into a charitable foundation in Conrad's name, which I can have established within 30 days. You retain lifetime income from the duplex. The foundation is incorporated to provide legal aid to elderly women facing financial pressure from their adult children. I can think of no more appropriate cause. I closed my eyes. Cordelia. Yes. Conrad would have approved. Conrad would have stood up at his desk and clapped. Genevieve. We signed the documents on Wednesday. The new structure was registered with the county on Friday. Tobias came over for lunch the following Sunday. Alone. I served him cold chicken and warm potato salad. He ate 2 helpings. He told me, over coffee, that Marisol had not spoken to him in 5 days, that she had moved into their guest room, that her mother, Eulalia, had called him on Tuesday evening to say that Marisol was devastated, and that Eulalia was very disappointed in how I had handled the meeting. I asked Tobias what he had said to Eulalia. He said, "Mom, I told her that you handled the meeting better than any of us deserved, and that if she wanted to discuss disappointment, I had a few feelings of my own I'd be glad to share." She hung up. I nodded. Tobias, I am going to tell you something that I have not told you, and that you are not going to tell Marisol. Okay. I recorded the meeting on Sunday. I recorded all 47 minutes of it. Cordelia has the recording. She used it to restructure my will. Marisol is no longer a beneficiary of anything I own. The house will go to Wren in trust. Conrad's duplex is now a charitable foundation. He set down his coffee cup. He looked at me for a long time. Then he laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was the laugh of a 43-year-old man who had just understood something about his mother that he had not previously understood. The laugh of a son recalibrating. Mom. Yes. You recorded us. I did. How long had you been planning that? Since I read Marisol's text on Tuesday afternoon. Mom. Tobias, I want you to understand something. The recording was not planned as a weapon. It was planned as documentation. If the meeting had been an honest meeting, if Marisol had brought genuine concerns about my well-being, presented them honestly, and accepted my responses, the recording would have stayed in my purse, would never have been transcribed, would have been deleted by Wednesday evening. The recording became a weapon because the meeting became an ambush. I did not turn it into a weapon. Marisol did. I simply happened to be holding the documentation when she did. He was quiet. Mom, what do I do? Tobias, you and Marisol will have to figure out what your marriage looks like after this. That is not my conversation. What you do with me is simple. The first Sunday of every month. Lunch. My house. Alone. For 1 year. After 1 year, we will reassess. Wren is welcome at my house every other Saturday. Driven by you, not by Marisol. If you need to bring Marisol with you to a Saturday visit at any point in the next year, the answer is no. After 1 year, again, we will reassess. Mom, Marisol. Marisol is going to ask me, eventually, what I think about being removed from your will. Tobias. You have not been removed from my will. Marisol has been removed from any inheritance she would have received through community property. Your share is intact, restructured for accountability. The house and the duplex are no longer available to either of you. That is a different conversation. When Marisol asks, you may tell her the truth. The truth is that I redirected the assets that mattered most to your father into structures that protect them from anyone, including me, making bad decisions during my final years. That is, in fact, what I did. He nodded slowly. Mum, the recording. Are you going to play it for me? I thought about it for a moment. Then I said, No, Tobias, I am not. I want you to live with your own memory of the meeting. Your memory is not going to be perfect, and that is the point. You will spend the next year asking yourself what was said and what you did not say. That memory is going to do more work for you than any recording could. The recording is Cordelia's. It will stay in her files. It will not surface unless someone challenges the will after my death, in which case it will protect Ren. That is its only purpose now. Mom. Yes. You are very good at this. Tobias. I had a husband who taught me for 46 years how to be slow and careful. I have been slow and careful for a long time. I am simply applying it to a new category. That night, I sat in Conrad's reading chair with the small notebook. I had started keeping the morning after the meeting, and I wrote one line. They held a family meeting about my future. They forgot to check who owned the recorder. So the meeting they held about my future became the meeting that ended theirs. And the voice recorder Conrad bought us in 2011 for our anniversary, which had been sitting in Adelaide's drawer for 6 years, finally got the dinner it had been waiting for. Sometimes dignity does not arrive with shouting. Sometimes it arrives in a small black device, in a half-zipped handbag, on a couch in someone else's living room, quietly listening, while the people in the room mistake it for a Bluetooth speaker. Then I closed the notebook, and I drank what was left of my tea, and I slept the way a woman sleeps when she has finally documented the meeting her family had decided would happen without her actually being in the room, and discovered, on the recording, that she had been there all along, and had won the meeting without saying a word, until it was time.